Most, if not all of the country has seen this video. And that is exactly what federal immigration authorities don't want anyone to see ever again. They don't want you to trust your eyes, because even if you use a gram of critical thought, you can see that Alex Pretti did not pose a violent threat to those ICE officers and was brutally murdered in front of fellow Minnesotans. And after this second ICE killing in Minnesota, the state had to go to court just to stop the federal government from destroying evidence. If that sounds insane, it's because it is. Less than a mile where I was staying for the weekend, Alex Pretti was shot on Nicollet Avenue by federal agents. A Minnesota judge has now summoned the ICE leaders to court and threatens contempt sanctions. The chief judge, a George W. Bush appointee, said the administration had repeatedly violated or slow walked court orders in Minnesota. Minnesota's chief federal judge has ordered the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Todd Lyons, to appear in his courtroom Friday and threatened to hold him in contempt for what he says has been repeated defiance of judges' orders in the state. The court's patience is at an end, U.S. District Judge Patrick Schlitz said in a 3-page order issued Monday night, demanding the acting director explain himself personally. Schlitz's frustration has been boiling for weeks amid Operation Metro Surge, the Trump administration's massive immigration enforcement action in the Twin Cities. The operation has flooded the courts with emergency lawsuits brought by immigrants who say they have been illegally arrested or detained. The judges in the district have agreed nearly every time, ordering their immediate release from custody and warning in increasingly alarming terms about rampant violations of the law. The practical consequence of respondents' failure to comply has almost always been significant hardship to aliens, many of whom have lawfully lived and worked in the United States for years and done absolutely nothing wrong, Schlitz wrote. The detention of an alien is extended, or an alien who should remain in Minnesota is flown to Texas, or an alien who has been flown to Texas is released there and told to figure out a way to get home. The Department of Homeland Security and ICE did not respond immediately to requests for comment. This lawsuit shows that there is significant worry that the Trump administration can alter, destroy, or lose key evidence. A federal judge has agreed and issued a temporary restraining order blocking all federal agencies from touching anything related to this case. Let me repeat that. A federal judge has ordered the federal government not to destroy evidence in a police-involved shooting. This is not normal. This is a red flag and should be an alert to anybody that's skeptical of authoritarian control. We know why Minnesota doesn't trust ICE, because this has already happened before. The killing of Renee Good was completely unjustifiable, and we see her right here acting cordially with ICE agents. Sure, she might be yelling at them, she may be cursing. That is all within her First Amendment right. She is not providing any imminent danger or threat, and it's clear that she backs up her vehicle and turns her wheels to where she's trying to leave the scene. The FBI took control of this case and then shut Minnesota out of it. Any state and local law enforcement was not able to cooperate on the investigation, and the feds immediately tried to pursue her widow instead of the actual ICE agent that killed her, shot her in the face right here, Jonathan Ross. So Minnesotans know not to trust the federal government because they can't police themselves. They've already proven that. And it's not just protesters or the radical leftists in Minnesota. The FBI supervisor had to resign after trying to investigate the agent who shot Renee Good. News of Tracy Mergen's decision came before agents fatally shot Alex Pretti, another U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. A supervisor in the FBI's Minneapolis field office who unsuccessfully attempted to investigate the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent who fatally shot Renee Nicole Good in the city on January 7th has resigned, according to multiple reports. Mergen resigned following pressure from the Bureau of Washington, D.C. to discontinue any inquiry into ICE officer Jonathan Ross, who shot and killed Good, as videos showed her trying to drive away from a confrontation, according to the New York Times and NBC News. Those outlets cited sources. The FBI has not commented on Mergen's resignation, saying it does not comment on personnel matters. Federal authorities have refused to cooperate with local authorities, leading to claims by Democratic officials that the federal government is involved in a cover up. And it's not just Mergen who has resigned because of corruption allegations. Six federal prosecutors in Minnesota have resigned. Leaders inside the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division have resigned. And why have all of them done this? Because the Justice Department has refused to open a civil rights investigation into Renee Good's death. Even if you believe the narrative from the Department of Homeland Security, you should have an investigation to prove that transparency and show the American people that you're doing your due diligence at getting the truth out. We all know that that's a lie, though, which is why they're not doing that. Anytime that you refuse to be transparent about the truth, when you are a federal agency who's committed an act of state violence, you have to justify that violence. And if you can't even bring up an investigation, we know what's happening. It is a cover up. You don't want the truth to get out because you know you're in the wrong. When the people whose job is accountability start quitting in mass, that is not a political decision. That is institutional failure. And one of the most shameless ways that the federal government is trying to cover up their own corruption is by saying that the evidence was simply lost. ICE says critical evidence in abuse case was lost in a system crash a day after it was sued. So they received a lawsuit. All of a sudden, all of the evidence of the case, it got lost in a crash. I'm so sorry about that. The government has said we don't have resources to retain all footage and that plaintiffs could supply endless hard drives that we could save things to. The federal government claims that the day after it was sued for allegedly abusing detainees at an ICE detention center, a system crash deleted nearly 2 weeks of surveillance footage from inside the facility. People detained at ICE's Broadview Detention Center in suburban Chicago sued the government on October 30th. According to their lawyers and the government, nearly 2 weeks of footage that could show how they were treated was lost in a system crash that happened on October 31st. The government has said that the data for the period was lost in a system crash apparently on the day after the lawsuit was filed. Alex Solotrovsky, one of the lawyers representing people detained at the facility, said in a hearing about the footage on Thursday that 404 Media attended via phone. That period, we think, is going to be critical because that's the period right before the lawsuit was filed. We tried to engage with the government through our IT specialists, and we hired a video forensic specialist. He added that the government specialists they spoke to didn't really know anything beyond the basic specifications of the system. He wasn't able to answer any questions about preservation or attempts to recover the data. He said that the government eventually put him in touch with a person who ostensibly was involved in these events, attempting to recover the data. And it was a kind of no name LLC called 5 by 5 Management that appears to be based out of a house in Carroll Stream. We were told they were on site and involved with the system when October 20th to 30th data was lost, but nobody has told us that 5 by 5 Management or anyone else has been trying to recover the data. And also, very importantly, things like system logs, administrator logs, event logs, data in the system that may show changes to settings or configurations, or deletion events, or people accessing the system at important times. 5 by 5 Management could not be reached for comment. It is just the most blatant corruption. Are you kidding me? This is a familiar pattern. ICE, in multiple cases, and federal authorities have claimed key surveillance footage was lost due to system crashes conveniently after lawsuits were filed, over and over and over again. At some point, this can no longer be a coincidence, and it is a clear pattern of how the government is attempting to cover up their own crimes. This really highlights the structural issue that is underneath all of this. Many ICE and Border Patrol officers still operate without body cams. Funding for video documentation has been reduced, not expanded. So when someone is shot, someone dies, when abuse is alleged, there are often no independent visual records, just the agent's word. And that word continues to change depending on who that agency is talking to. This is not about one shooting. This is a clear pattern of behavior. Because when the same agency that is killing people is blocking investigators, losing footage, and escaping consequences, that is not law enforcement. That is an authoritarian regime. And the only reason why we're seeing the truth this time is because federal judges in Minnesota are refusing to let ICE erase it.